Okay, we're here to present to you on the student court, which is something that happened quite organically from our students. And it's about how our students took their school climate into their own hands. And for this reason, we brought a student to be a co-presenter. She's one of the students who started the court, and so I'll introduce her now. She's an eighth grade graduate of the Volcano School of Arts and Sciences, big sister to three little sisters. Ocean View Ka'u Rodeo Girl, and you can click the next slide. And the Volcano School of Arts and Sciences Student Court Prosecuting Attorney Michaela Akana. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to kind of ask a question, she's going to answer, and then I'm going to interject. So tell us how it started.
So how our student court started was we did have bullying issues at school. We were meeting as a group with Ms. Klima and our other teacher. It led to one student saying that we should be able to give out referrals, which it all fell into place.
So from my perspective, what happened was we were having a bullying intervention in the 8th grade. We had a circle, and they were all telling each other, like, well, here's the role I think you play, and here's how that made me feel when you said that. And one student, who, by the way, is not one of the most well-behaved students, says, can we give each other referrals? And that went on into this idea of student court. And then we met with the students who wanted to be a part of it, and I kept talking like I'm doing right now, saying, well, should we check? Do you guys want to look and see what other schools do? Or how about if we, let's go research this? And Michaela's like, no, we should just have a regular court. Anyway, and so now I'll tell you how they set it up.
How it all starts is a student gives out one of these, which is our tickets. And I decide whether it's going to court for it. I've had a few where a student gave another student a ticket for farting in class. And it was not an offense, so I just dropped it. And one of the things Ms. Klima had us do was level the tickets. A minor is level 1 till the fences grow each level we had to determine. The ticket was after that was handed to me, and I would write in the court date and give it to all of the members of part of our jury. We scheduled it, got our witnesses, talked to clients separately, split apart into 2 sections to talk to the people or clients, decide what we were going to do and how the court functioned.
And I went in there and they just took off. They're like, all rise. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell? I mean, it was like they did it all. And I was so blown away. I was like, wow, it's like, I think they knew more than I did about it, Well, you know what, this is a part, and this is why administrator was up there. Because the administrator, my role, basically what we did was, we had the judge, it was just to keep the order, so he was a facilitator, but not the decider. Then we had a lead juror, and that person was we had a lead juror who was always there, and then we had other students that were pulled in as jury members. Well, what happened is they would hear all the testimony, and then they would go outside and they would do 2 things. They would make a guilty or not guilty verdict, a decision, and then they would make a recommendation for sentencing, so for the consequences, and then it's the administrator's decision to accept those consequences or not. And then I'll just say for administrators out there, the way this dovetails to the referral, the behavior referral disciplinary process is that they would still get a referral if it was a referral behavior for documentation. And then if additional consequences or different consequences were needed, we would do that. But as it turned out, they were all right on, and we never needed to do that.
It kind of fell all into place where our school became safer for students.
Basically, they took ownership of their climate. We had a dynamic in that class, and many classes, as I'm sure most of your schools, where the students don't want to tell each other, they don't want to snitch on each other to the adults. And so this kind of circumvented that problem because they could just write a ticket to each other. And they really took ownership of that, and they didn't have an issue with it. They actually wrote more tickets than we actually could, that were relevant cases. And then they accepted the consequences. And they put it in a context, like in the court, they didn't feel shame, they actually felt supported. They're being defended by one of their peers in addition to, being held accountable, so that was also an interesting thing. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Students requested it all to be able to write up the teachers.
Oh, yes.
They want us to write up a lot of our teachers for things.
So we'll go there next. Let's see, Joe.
Did you identify the students who were being bullied and were they willing to come forward and testify?
Yeah, the people who were being bullied were able to come forward because they felt supported by who were they being defended by.
Gail.
What kind of consequences?
Some of our consequences were a lot of community service, apology letters to each other. Yeah, and we have these two boys had to shake hands and like sort of become friends in morning circle. And we did a one in school suspension.
They didn't have any consequences that I didn't agree with, which was interesting. Any other questions?
Is that only bullying or other issues also?
Other issues too. We had one issue with the assault case. We had one.
So anything that's a disciplinary offense, basically, they can write a ticket for. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, we have more questions. We'll get two more and then we'll be done. Yes, ma'am.
Was this a multiple grade level class or same class?
Oh, great. We just started it in the middle school, 6 through 8, and the student court members, the four who were always there, they were 8th graders. But they expressed wanting to actually shift the role, so we're looking next year. There's a lot of interest, so we're looking next year at switching the roles. And we already have 4th grade students interested in doing this at elementary with their upper elementary. Oh, the back there, yes.
I'm just curious if you guys would use this model only for tickets generated by students, or if you would run teacher incident reports through the court.
This is only, we agreed that adults will continue to use our disciplinary referral process and our behavior RTI framework, and that this was an avenue just for students. Okay. Thank you.
Because like the bullying stopped for sure, but also in court, people weren't afraid to speak up because they were being defended by a friend. And
yes, definitely in the middle school we saw a drop in bullying. We also actually saw an immediate shift in that dynamic of the students feeling that this is a us versus them with the adults.
so bullying is really like not that good for schools, but if you have a school where it's safe and no bullying, then people feel safe and they can express who they are. I was through bullying all through elementary, and I had to pretend to be someone I wasn't, and now I'm in middle school and I feel safe, and at Volcano School I feel really safe, so I'm able to express who I am.
I think before this, there was a dynamic among the students, like in a lot of schools and classes. We have, a small class that have been together for many years, and they don't want to tell the adults. It's like snitching, right? So they try to keep all their stuff under the radar, and nothing can really be appropriately dealt with. So this actually enabled them to deal with it in that same dynamic without feeling that they are having to tell on, their classmate to an adult. And they actually jumped right on that. There was no there was no transition really. It just jumped right into it. And I think that hearing from their peers how their behavior made them feel, and not just from the student that was maybe the victim, but from everybody else too. And the interesting thing is that the students who participated in building this court, there was a couple of popular kids, one of the not so popular kids, so they were a mix. And I think that also helped too, because it wasn't an us and them. It was mixed among the different groups and cliques in the school.
Yeah, I think they've seen what they've done to the students, and I think they recognize what they're doing, and when they recognize it, it kind of helps them stop what they're doing.
Some other actually unexpected outcomes of this were that it helped to clarify for the students what is acceptable behavior, what is bullying, because, we had a flurry of tickets that weren't really any offense. It was just the student was annoyed at another student for something, but it really wasn't a problem. And so it really forced them to go. Michaela would take them to the list and show them the list of offenses. This is, can you find it on here? And they would start to realize, oh, okay, this is, what actually is a bullying, and this is just what is a normal annoying behavior, for example. Another unexpected benefit was that where normally with a report of bullying it would take hours of investigation over several days, this is basically gets that done in 30 to 40 minutes. So then I can hear all of the testimony and the witnesses, and then I can consult, actually mostly listen to the jury as they're deciding, and then I can say right then if we are accepting the consequences or not. And then I would just probably have further follow-up with the student. Yeah, so the way that we had it work was that the jury would have, they would make two decisions. One is they would make this decision about guilty or not guilty, so that verdict. And then the second is they would make recommendations about the sentencing or the consequences to administrators, and then we would decide, make the final decision on the consequences. Okay, so the consequences would be dependent on the behavior. So it could be anywhere from 1 to 5 days community service, and that would be it could be during both recesses or maybe only during lunch recess. It could be having to make formal apologies, and also it could be an in-school or out-of-school suspension.
For kids to feel safe at school, I think it's really super important, because if kids don't feel safe, they won't come to school, and we won't have schools after that, because kids aren't going because they don't feel safe at all.
They didn't feel like being punished, or they didn't feel they were being singled out in a way. It was sort of a proud kind of accepting responsibility. And I would say in some cases, we had only one student who was a defendant twice. And interestingly, his father is a retired police officer. And so he had called me up and had a personal conversation about how much of a difference that made for him to go through that process, and that they really feel like that it's fair, so they feel almost empowered by it, by having the opportunity also to have their voice and call their own witnesses as well. A special needs student, very special needs student, and very awkward, and being defended by this popular, girl. And he was just tickled. It was just like the best thing. He just kept giggling because he just couldn't believe that here is this girl that, is he views as being, more popular, or, that kind of thing, as a higher status. And she is defending him. She's making arguments to defend his behavior. It was pretty impressive. Many of the students were asking if they could give tickets to teachers, and I'm not quite sure how that would work, but I think it's something we need to explore.
Yeah, we're super proud of what we've done, because we've made our school safer, number one, and we're just really happy that it all fell into place and how everything's going, because now our school has become safer than what it was.